Oh, the chaos. It is still coming our way. Welcome to a brand new edition of NFL Power Rankings. It is presented by Energizer. Mike Am and Eric at home with you. If you want to take a look at the entire list of rankings, all you have to do is scan that QR code. We're going through some of the big hitters. And by the way, Eric, here we go. We got some movement at the top. And by the way, two teams not in the top 10 that you think should scare the league's elite.
Yeah, I think in a season, Mike, where there isn't a whole lot of mystery about who is going to get in the playoffs, not that many teams sort of vying for those spots like we normally have. We do have two teams in the playoff picture, the Bucs and Rams, just outside my top 10. I think could make a move or be a very scary opponent in the playoffs.
Yeah, look at the Atlanta Falcons. We'll touch on them because the Bucs at this point not an exact lock to go and win that division. And at the end of the day, still don't know what's going to happen in the NFC West. I know Atlanta fans are like, did you see Kirk Cousins out there? I did, but I'm just looking at the remaining schedule, and maybe we see Michael Penix. More on that in just a moment, but let's go with the top. All right, here's the change. And I love when we can start off the show and we'll talk about a new number one, and that is the Philadelphia Eagles. Maybe the most impressive thing of that win, a second half shutout to the Steelers. The Bills at number 2, yeah, they're the real deal. The Chiefs at 3, got some real questions about Patrick Mahomes and his health. The Lions, speaking of health, walking wounded. We will talk about that in just a moment. The Vikings continue to figure out ways to win some football games. The Packers, they dominate Seattle. Lamar not out of the MVP conversation as his Ravens are in the 7th spot. And the Steelers, just 56 rushing yards, no rushing touchdowns. A little bit of a cause for concern, but still in the top 10, sitting at number 8. It's time for the Team of the Week, and it's presented by Truist. All right, so let's start with this number one team here. The Philadelphia Eagles, Eric, and this is a squad that had a little bit of, I don't want to say dysfunction, maybe that's overstating things, but a little bit of controversy. You had A.J. Brown and Jalen Hurts. Look, they were winning, and there was still potentially at least an issue. They get another impressive win, and those guys seem to be simpatico on the same page.
Yeah, I think so. I think that's the way to answer a question, right? It leads up to the game. It's been the discussion point all week long. And then what do? They pass their way to victory. Antonio Brown using that very specific word after the win over Carolina, suggesting things aren't going well. Well, they did Sunday. And it's nice to know, Mike, that you can have Saquon Barkley kind of have an off day, certainly by his standards anyway, but not be the focal part of the offense. Jalen Hurts was dialed in. He was effective as a scrambler and as a thrower. A.J. Brown, the leading receiver. Devontae Smith, very active. Having both those guys go off in the same game makes them that much more dangerous. Love the way the defense played. And frankly, I didn't think it was that close a game. I thought they outplayed them pretty thoroughly, maybe more so than the score indicated.
Yeah, I'm with you there, at least on the MVP watch with Saquon Barkley. A dominant performance against this Steelers team, I think, would have kept him in that conversation. I'm not saying that he's out. It's just tougher for running backs in general, and I think that margin is not as big. It does feel like Josh Allen is clearly in pole position right now for that award. His Buffalo Bills continue to win. Now, caveat here, and we'll talk about it when we discuss Detroit. They're obviously banged up, but Josh just continues to perform at a ridiculously high level, and he's got kind of like these Heisman moments, right? Like we talk about that for that award. He's got these MVP moments, and I think a win against the Lions that we just witnessed with another big game maybe cements it for him.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, he kind of helped his stock with the loss over the Rams, sort of as a one-man show, bringing his team back to the cusp of victory. Bills had to hold on in this one, but they needed every single one of the points that Allen generated, and he was spectacular. You know, some of the ball placements, Mike, on those long throws were terrific. And to me, the biggest thing for the difference between what we've seen from Allen in the past is he's had those Heisman moments or those MVP moments before, but the down-to-down consistency and the accuracy, the lack of turnovers this year has been a huge reason why his game is elevated, I think. And yeah, Buffalo has some defensive issues they've got to work out, certainly. Last 2 games have kind of exposed them, but when you have a nuclear-grade weapon at quarterback, sometimes that isn't even all that important. So I think the Bills are in great shape. Just behind the Eagles, could make a case for either one of them at number 1. This is a really potent team right now.
All right, I will ask if you like them better than the Chiefs, but I want to get your take on Kansas City right now because I think there's a world that exists where the usage of Patrick Mahomes, certainly in question, dealing obviously with the ankle sprain. I don't know, like what am I supposed to make of this team? Because I get home field advantage. I understand how important it is, but there's a world, at least in my mind, where I go, hey, should I be rolling Patrick Mahomes not at 100% down the stretch out in a lot of these games?
Yeah, go figure. It's their first early win in months, or easy win, I should say, in months, where they get ahead, they put it out of arm's reach, and cruise to victory. And what do? We have something else to talk about, and that's Mahomes' injury. And look, he's played through pain before, played almost an entire season through an injury, and still won a Super Bowl. So, we have to kind of grade it on a scale, just like we graded all the close victories on a scale, because of all the goodwill the Chiefs have built up the last several years. So, yeah, I'm concerned. I don't have enough information right now. We haven't seen Mahomes in action, obviously, to know what he's capable of. Will he even play this coming weekend against the Texans? So, a lot of questions. It really does sort of put the target on this defense again. And maybe it's not quite as good a group as the one that had L'Jarius Sneed last year, but still, this is a defense that, at its best, can carry this team to a championship, especially, like you said, if they get home field advantage at Arrowhead.
Just for context here, they get the win against Cleveland on a Sunday. They're playing Houston on Saturday. So the Texans, they could use the signature win to bolster their confidence. There's no question about that. And then they're playing on Christmas Day. So we're talking about a very short period of time with a Patrick Mahomes that's not at 100%. I just throw that out there. Are they better than the Bills? And I know we got the head-to-head, but just generally speaking, in a postseason, do you like the Bills better than the Chiefs?
Yeah, I do right now, but obviously once we turn the page to the postseason, we know how that history has gone, right? The Bills have sort of had a little bit of an edge in the regular season matchups. The Chiefs, obviously, in the postseason. So, it might come down to what kind of shape both these teams are in a month from now if they do end up meeting. But yeah, I would say I like the Bills by a sliver, especially with the Mahomes injury kind of tipping in that direction.
Okay, where teams are currently at is a different conversation than where they are going to be. Here's what I can tell you about the Detroit Lions, who sit at number 4. This story doesn't feel great, and I love what they've been able to accomplish. But, Eric, I look all over the football field, especially on the defensive side. All I see are hurt dudes.
It's adding up at an alarming rate, and now we also get the news, not just the defense affected, but David Montgomery with the MCL injury. He's done for the year. We know how important he is to that sort of thunder and lightning backfield they have, but, Aleem McNeil, a big piece up front, he's now out. Carlton Davis possibly could return in about 6 weeks, but that's putting him on, they've got to get to the NFC Championship game if they want to have him back. News may be getting worse, too, on Aiden Hutchinson if they were to make a Super Bowl run. So, yeah, everything seems to be trending in the wrong direction. You and I both know this has been the best team in football more often than it hasn't this season. But this late season turn, it's like the Lions just can't have nice things or something. Now, maybe they'll pull through it. This is Dan Campbell and company, but right now they're really up against it.
Schedule somewhat favorable when you consider it's the Bears and the Niners.
Sure.
Both of those games are on the road, and then they close out Week 18 in a game that not only could decide the division, but who gets the 1 seed in Week 18 against the Minnesota Vikings. That is a home game in Detroit. Speaking of the Vikings, I loved what you said last week on the show. Not that Sam Darnold's the MVP this year, but he deserves to be in the conversation. Couldn't agree with you more. The Vikings, they are as dangerous as any team in the NFL. I've had some folks on social media hit me up and say, hey, stop talking about us. We want to fly under the radar. I think they're grabbing enough attention now. We have to pay attention to what they are doing on the football field.
Yeah, it feels different to me. 2 years ago, when they were a 13-14 with the negative point differential, we had an easy sort of talking point. They didn't necessarily match the eye test. The 13 wins felt like an aberration. This year, however, with right now an even better record, at least win percentage wise, they look the part, right? They've got the number 1 receiver healthy in Justin Jefferson. They have the sidekick in Addison. Darnold has cut down on his turnovers and played great football. And that defense, I thought, really set the tone against Chicago. Those first 3 or 4 series of the game really kind of took over. Jonathan Grenard attacking Caleb Williams, forcing that fumble. And after all those early stops, they didn't convert a lot, but they built up enough of a big lead and then put it away in the second half. So a much cleaner outing than the game at Soldier Field, where they dominated and then gave up the big run at the end. We're kind of frankly lucky to win. So I think they're just sort of cleaning up some of their little messes that they made earlier in the season and turning out sort of crisper performances as we go along in the season.
I think when you assess the teams, as from a fan perspective, and you sit back and you go, who are legitimately the teams that can make a run? Like, what's the mental makeup of a lot of these squads? You got to be mentally tough, but what do you do really well? I tend to favor, you got to be so dominant on one side of the football to overcome some deficiencies, maybe on the other side. This is a complete Vikings team. Offensively, we know what they're able to do. Defensively, Brian Flores has got these guys absolutely rolling. And I think there's fans in Green Bay that are sitting there go, let's pump the brakes here. Let's relax. We have an opportunity to win this division. Now, Green Bay needs some things to fall into place. But the best sign for me, Eric, is Jordan Love, who is a turnover machine to start the season, hasn't thrown a pick in the last 4 games, a couple primetime matchups. He's got 7 touchdowns during that span. He's elevating this Packers team.
I agree. He absolutely is. You may have questions about whether the defense can stop a top unit. You may have concerns about little pieces on the offensive line or whether the special teams are going to crumble. But I really think that offense, especially with Love playing more turnover-free ball, as you said, has become one of the more dangerous quarterbacks in the league. You saw the Detroit Lions go for it late against the Green Bay Packers. I think it wasn't just the Lions being the Lions. It was them being scared of Jordan Love, because he's shown consistently that he's got a ton of weapons. Romeo Doubs comes out of witness protection to catch 2 touchdowns. After a quiet game, Jaden Reed heats up. Tucker Kraft can get going. Christian Watson. They have so many options in that passing game. I love the diversity. And oh, by the way, Josh Jacobs can tenderize you for the first half of a game like he did on Sunday too. So, it was a strong performance. They beat a good Seattle team in Seattle and really sent a message that even though they haven't beaten those top teams this year, they are absolutely capable of doing so if they convert 1 or 2 more possessions in those outings.
Yeah. All right, we got a little bit more to come here on NFL Power Rankings. In fact, there's one team that we thought were giants heading into the season. Not the Giants, the Houston Texans is who I'm talking about. Eric doesn't have them in the top 10. He explains why. Coming up next. Back here on Power Rankings as we take a look at Eric's teams 9 through 16. The Broncos have won 4 straight. They're outscoring their opponents 139-70 during that span. Commanders sit at number 10, a nail biter against the Saints. At 11, it's the Houston Texans who clinch the AFC South. The Bucs, real dangerous. We'll dive in on them in just a moment. The Chargers at 13 with that high-powered defense. The Rams, speaking of dangerous teams, sitting in the 14th position, got an opportunity to go and win that division. Currently at the top, occupied by the Seahawks, who are the 15th ranked team, and the Cardinals figure out a way to get a victory, are at 16. All right, let's focus in on this Broncos team. The sign of a good team, Eric, is sometimes when you have some issues and some mistakes, you still figure out a way to get it done. Bo Nix obviously had a costly interception in that game, and I thought it was going to sort of result in potentially a loss. Resilient makeup of this squad. How high are you right now on this Denver team?
Yeah, Nix's play has concerned me a little bit, right? The turnovers have gone up and some of the sort of play that he's had lately, it's been a little loose and not the same kind of level that we saw earlier in the system when he was playing within the confines of the offense a lot more. But still, you have a defense that can create turnovers the way Denver can. That's going to help you a lot, too. They're still figuring out the run game. I don't know if there's another receiver they truly trust outside of Cortland Sutton, but we'll see. They're plucky. They're well coached, too. Sean Payton has done a good job in kind of managing Nix's ups and downs a little bit. But, yeah, this was a desperate Colts team they faced on Sunday. It wasn't pretty early. The Colts had their opportunities to open up the game, but Denver hung in there and then had the big fourth quarter to kind of put it away. Still a little shaky for me, but big matchup coming up with the Chargers in 2 weeks, and that'll obviously help decide positioning a lot in that AFC wildcard picture.
I'm actually glad that you brought up Sean Payton. We've been having some conversations in our hallways here at NFL Media. And look, Mike Tomlin's name pops up for Coach of the Year. I've thrown out O'Connell, but I think Sean Payton deserves to be in that mix. In fact, I would maybe even argue it's O'Connell, then Payton, and then Tomlin. But we still got a couple weeks of the season to see how it shakes out. The Commanders sitting at number 10. They move up one spot. They get Philadelphia coming up this week. I was amazed by this stat, Eric, because we always talk about teams coming off of a bye. It was the Commanders' first road win coming off a bye since 2002. Boy, what a time to go and pick up a win here. To me, it was just nice to see this team get a W and maybe put themselves at least back in that conversation for a team that maybe could make a run. Maybe, possibly. I don't know.
Maybe. Yeah, maybe. Obviously, Jaden Daniels is a dangerous guy. We saw that. Obviously, he's kind of rediscovered his scrambling a little bit, made some big throws, was accurate, but the sacks really kept adding up. And after they got up, 17-0 or whatever it was, they took their foot off the gas. The Saints crawled back in it. find a way, with a backup core. They're really their third string quarterback in Spencer Rattler. And Washington was fortunate to get out of New Orleans with a win. Obviously, it came down to that 2-point conversion at the end. You like the fact that the defense made a game-changing play there. I moved them up. We've got the game against the Eagles that'll tell us a lot about them. That's obviously sort of a telltale game for them. And, do they stack up? We were playing tough teams earlier in the season, but now as we get a little later, their shine has kind of rubbed off a little bit. We'd love to see a little stronger, cleaner performance against one of the best teams in football.
I thought there was an opportunity that you might slot the Houston Texans into the 10th place. Look, they're 11th, so we're not talking about a huge jump here. There's just something in my mind that is cool when you can say, hey, we're a top 10 team. They're on the precipice of that. They create 3 turnovers in the form of interceptions against a Tua squad that needed a win. Houston needed a win as well. They get Kansas City, nice barometer game. Hopefully Mahomes goes and plays here. What do you make of this squad?
Yeah, they haven't been able to get Joe Mixon going lately. Obviously, Nico Collins and Stroud were great in the red zone, but just the drives were not there. They had to rely on each of those 4 turnovers, 3 picks, and 1 fumble. The big strip sack there that I think kind of changed momentum a little bit in that game. Those were crucial. I don't know if they win if they only get 2 or 3, let's say. And that fake punt too. Dario Ogunbowale gets down there in the red zone, almost fumbles. They fall on it. There's a penalty. They keep the ball and score after that to go up 20-6. So, it really took a lot of good field position and stealing possessions for them to score points. So I am a little bit worried about that offense, but it's nice when you can be efficient when the defense does give you those opportunities. You convert them into touchdowns and put desperate teams like Miami away.
I am excited to hear your take on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, who you have at 12. It wasn't just a win. It was a dominant performance against one of the teams that we felt for a good stretch of this season was as dangerous as any in the AFC, and that's the Chargers. Throw up 40 points against a defense that I felt great about this season. How dangerous is this team?
Yeah, they can turn it on fast, right? And we've seen Baker Mayfield have some first halves where he gets in a little trouble or throws some interceptions and, things are a little chaotic, and then all of a sudden he dials in. He made that one post throw to Mike Evans, the ageless Mike Evans. Looks like he could get that 1,000-yard season, yet another one. Incredible consistency throughout his career. He's fully back from the injury, making a difference. Jalen McMillan has stepped up too. So those 3 were really big on Sunday. You're down 17-10. You turn the ball over midway through the second quarter at midfield. Things aren't looking great, but then you have the ability to rip off 30 straight points unanswered over the final 35 minutes or so in the game. That's dominant on the road against, like you said, a good quality opponent who's going to probably end up in the postseason in the Chargers, and they just ran through them like it was nothing. So that's why I put them in that dangerous team group. I think they really can make some noise in the postseason. Remember how tough they were against the Lions in the playoffs last year. I think we're seeing an almost better version, certainly offensively, than what we saw last year.
There's a story about both of those teams. 1, how good Tampa Bay is, and 2, the need from a Chargers perspective to get some other playmakers, high-level playmakers, to squash a run that you made reference to. Keep in mind, the Buccaneers have 1 game lead in the standings, and they do not have, I should say, the head-to-heads against the Atlanta Falcons. So not done just yet in terms of that race. Time for Future Champions, presented by FanDuel. And taking a look at the odds here, the Rams, the favorite to go and win this division. The Seahawks right behind them. The Arizona Cardinals in that 3rd position. And just in case you're wondering, FanDuel not giving the San Francisco 49ers a chance to go and win the NFC West. But let's focus in on the number 14 team. Look, you told me the Bucs were really dangerous. The Rams are also in that conversation as well. There was some concern that I was starting to have down the stretch here about the Rams. They've seemed to right the ship. I've been high on them all season long. I think they got snake bit earlier this season because of some of the injuries, especially on their offensive line. But when this offense is going, boy, oh boy, I think you can make an argument they're top 2 or 3 in the league.
Yeah, they're a scary team. And I love the fact, Mike, that in the span of 4 days, they won 2 games in 2 close games, too, in completely different fashions. You have the shootout against the Bills where they're all gas, no brakes, knowing they're going to have to outscore Josh Allen, one of the league's best players. You turn around, you go into a rain-soaked game up in San Francisco on a short week, and you win a field goal fest, a defensive battle. So that tells me the Rams can match up against a variety of different style of teams, and so that kind of helps them in their playoff quest. You know, obviously they could be hosting a game, but you never know who you're going to draw. You never know how it's going to lay out. And I love the fact they can win games 44-42, or they can win them 12-6. The defense has made strides, but you said it. I think the most dangerous aspect is Matthew Stafford in the playoffs with the ball in his hand and the game on the line. And then those two receivers, having Nakua and Cooper Kupp healthy, obviously makes a world of difference for their offense. We saw them without him. They couldn't move the ball. With them now, they're a very explosive team.
Yeah, and look, once again, I know they didn't have a touchdown on TNF, but the point is that was an ugly game in terms of the weather conditions on the road, short week against a divisional opponent. To me, I think you sit there and you say, hey, even with an inability because of the weather to really be effective in the air game, Nakua almost gets 100. Kyron Williams, one of the most underrated running backs that we have in the NFL, and they will go on the road again as they match the New York Jets. Meanwhile, they have a great shot of being a postseason team. In fact, even with the tiebreakers in their favor, got to feel cautiously optimistic, but there's a major question about QB1 for the Atlanta Falcons. We dive into the ATL coming up next. Back here on Power Rankings as we dive into teams 17 through 24. We'll talk about the Falcons, who are at 7-7. They move up 3 spots. The 49ers got some turmoil around this team. At 19, it's the Dolphins. 3 picks by Tua. Ooh, bad timing for that. At 20, the Bengals not dead yet. At 21, it's the Cowboys, followed by the Colts, the Saints, and the Bears at 24. Time for Power Moves presented by Energizer. Eric, I want to hit you up on Team 17. The Atlanta Falcons, once again, they got the head-to-head tiebreaker against the Tampa Bay Bucs. Only 1 game back right now. What do you do if you're Raheem Morris with Kirk Cousins?
Boy, yeah, they did move up 3. I am cautioning people, don't read too much into that because there is a Kirk Cousins problem right now. At least, the eye test certainly tells us. And also just the behavior of the Falcons, right? After he threw that third quarter interception on Monday night, they barely threw the ball after that, really lean on the run game. It was working for a while, but, you see the Raiders storm back, have an opportunity, multiple opportunities to try to go steal that game last night. And Cousins was a big reason why they were kind of held back. He did make the first touchdown throw in his 5 games. It's nice for him to get off that schneid, but another pick added to his total this year. And yeah, I don't know what they do. They've got Michael Penix in the pen. I don't know if it's a respect thing, a veteran thing, or if they just don't feel like Penix is ready, but the playoffs are hanging in the balance, Mike, and they're sticking with him at least to this point. I don't know how much longer they can afford to do so, though.
Yeah, not the easiest decision to make for Raheem Morris, although maybe fans in Atlanta are saying, actually, it is pretty easy considering what we've seen from Kirk Cousins. Yeah. Meanwhile, teams 25 through 32. Here we go. The Browns, they dropped another one. The Jets teasing some fans with that win against the Jags. At 27, it's the Panthers, then the Jaguars, then the Patriots at 29. Tennessee Titans sitting in the 30th position, followed by the Raiders and the New York Giants. All right, at 26, because it's a win, all I'm going to say here, Eric, is I think Devontae Adams and Aaron Rodgers might be auditioning together as a package deal for their next team. Adams, 9 catches, 198 receiving yards, and 2 touchdowns. We can talk about them, but I'm calling an audible here. I'm going to say, no, we don't need to talk about the Jets. We're moving on from that season. Eric, you and I have been blessed this season. My first year on this show, working with Madison Sanders, who's been our producer, who is now moving on. Madison, we are going to miss you. I'm sorry for hijacking the end of the show. We only had like 30 seconds left. So, did you want us to really talk about the Jets? Eric, if you had something you wanted to say, I guess we could do it.
I love Madison Sanders much more than I do the Jets. So, yes, I'm very happy that we're talking. Good luck in your next endeavor. We're lucky to have been with you, and we'll miss you.
Yeah, no, absolutely, Madison. Best of luck to you. And as Eric made reference to, we will miss you. Appreciate everyone watching another edition of Power Rankings.